What is the state of the world? Are we getting any closer to extinction, or maybe deliberately or inadvertently, maybe postponing it with good decisions by our politicians and economists? Which is it? And I can't really tell you myself. Sometimes it feels like they're trying to do their best, considering the tools they have, whatever's available to them, create more money, try to hold on, keep inflation low, raise labor, in other words, employment, hopefully reduce taxes. Maybe that's what they're trying to do. These are the tools they can work with. Um, but the question is that on the other hand, you got these two worlds that they've now created: the Eastern world, Russia and China on the one hand, and the Western world, Europe and the United States primarily on the other. And unlike China, China has the same population or more population than Europe and the United States combined. But China's a union, whereas the United States or the American Empire is a confederation. The United States has to constantly send its people out there to different countries to say, look, we want you to do this for us, because those countries are aligned with the United States, but they don't have a direct, order from Washington, even though sometimes it seems like that. Okay, but China, on the other hand, is a union. And, unions usually are stronger than confederations. Anyways, that's just a thought there. Let's see what the state of the world is. These are some notions that you'll see out there this week. 100 trillion world economy. We're getting to the 100 trillion. Of course, a lot of that is inflation, devaluation, But what do you see there? Well, you see China and the United States. And for China, it says it's probably going to catch up or surpass the United States as the number one economy in the world in about 5 years. That's what the projections are. And meanwhile, they say, on the other hand, the United States has been the number one economy of the world since 1871. So the reign of this new Rome, this new Roman Empire, seems like it's coming to an end. Numbers show that. And again, a lot of these projections are just mathematical projections. They don't have to do necessarily with physics. They have to do with math. They just say, well, what's the average growth in the last few years? Well, they project that, and they say, and that's what we think is going to happen. But sometimes you can't, physics is a little different than math in that sense, right? Realities out there don't necessarily match what these economists, they're doing their blackboards. That's what I'm saying. Anyways, you can see Europe has fallen behind compared to what it was last century. It was a powerhouse. Now it's falling behind the United States and China. Okay, so that's something to keep in mind. There are some changes going on in the world, and the question is whether China will surpass the United States in the next 5 years or not. And this is what the trend looks like. You can see that Europe and Japan are falling behind. Their curve is not so pronounced. And China, on the other hand, is growing faster than the U.S., in fact, twice as fast as the United States. And again, they expect it to pass the United States in the next 5 years. Okay, these are the projections. Again, a lot of this is just math, not physics. It doesn't necessarily reflect what's happening on the ground or what will happen on the ground in the next few years. These are just projections. We cannot predict the future, even though our science critic believes otherwise. Okay, and says China will become the global economy's biggest growth driver in the next 5 years, doubling the U.S. contribution, IMF says, the International Monetary Fund. China will contribute 22.6% of total world growth, while the U.S. will only contribute 11.3%. That's about half. Exactly half, if you follow those numbers. Half of global growth will be concentrated in China, the US, India, and Indonesia. These are very populous countries. That's why they put them up there. China will become the biggest driver of global growth over the next 5 years and will contribute double what the US adds, according to the IMF. Okay, and yeah, you can see that the numbers show that it's essentially China is going to pass the United States. Whether that will happen or not, that's a separate issue. And that's economics. You remember, economics does translate into military power as well. Okay? And that's another thing to look out for. Very important point, by the way. Okay. Okay, so because of that, the United States, is a little worried about that trend, and it's acting now so that maybe in 5 years, what the IMF projects doesn't happen. That's maybe the hope, the prayer, right? And it's putting the pressure on countries to cut their relations with China as part of that deal to see if they can slow China's growth down, at the same time attempting to deprive China of anything that can help its military. Okay, those are the ideas behind the rulers in the United States. And here we have a case. Italy rethinks its close China ties as U.S. backs stronger break. And you can see there at the bottom, they want to pull Meloni, who is the Prime Minister of Italy. She wants to pull out of this so-called Belt and Road Initiative. And I'll cover that in a second here. But you can see the trends there. China is selling more to Europe than what it's buying, and the deficit is growing. And so that they're trying to see if they can overturn that, or at least somehow prevent it from being so exponential as it looks there. Okay. What is this road and Belt and Road or Belt and Road Initiative? Belt and Road, I think it is. And here it is. It says the Belt and Road Initiative is a global infrastructure development strategy adopted by the Chinese government in 2013 to invest in more than 150 countries and international organizations. And it's considered the centerpiece of Xi Jinping's foreign policy, and it's been compared to America's Marshall Plan. Remember, after World War II, the Marshall Plan was used to reconstruct Europe. Okay, there's a lot of countries, 151 countries that have signed up, and you can see there at the bottom, what does it cover? Initiative infrastructure investments include ports, skyscrapers, railroads, roads, bridges, airports, dams, coal-fired power station, railroad tunnels. So they've got a lot of infrastructure that they're contributing to. And what is interesting is that they've incorporated into the Constitution of China, so it's part of their constitution. Okay, so that's something to think about. It's something very serious as far as they're concerned. And this is what the map looks like of this Belt and Road. Okay. And again, what is interesting there doesn't seem to include the English-speaking world too much, especially United States and Canada. They're not there. Okay, and I'm wondering how much it includes, Great Britain and Australia. And again, I don't think, or New Zealand, none of the English-speaking countries are really into this very much. Maybe they signed up for one or two things there, but they're probably going to pull out just like Italy is trying to do now. Okay, so, again, this is something that the United States is not very fond of because it only helps the Chinese economy. It makes them look good also, and the United States plays no part in it. And I guess the United States is not very happy with that. Okay. So, again, you got to look at these things because these are you could say, mega trends, okay, of what's going on out there. Okay, in a similar matter, we had here Lula, and he goes to Spain, Portugal. He went also to Spain, I think. And he was not greeted very nicely by Ukrainians over there. They said that his comments are not well received. And he was saying that, again, he thinks that there should be peace in Ukraine and that both sides are guilty, so to speak. He put them on equal footing. And they didn't like that. They said, no, why on equal footing? Russia has invaded another country. That's the way they look at it in the West. Other people look at it differently. And one thing I can share with you is the following, and that's, what is Brazil? Brazil is the biggest country in South America. This is what it looks like, the map in the Americas, what is called Latin America, okay? And North America only has Mexico. Anything between Mexico and that southern continent we call South America is Central America. Then you have Cuba and other islands in the region are known as, the Caribbean Americas or whatever. And then you have South America, which is the big green part there. But there's maybe that's not a good way of separating all these countries. So let's look at a different way of dividing this up. Okay, and there you can see Spanish speaking countries versus Portuguese, which is essentially Brazil. That's it. And then you have some other countries that speak French and English there. Belize, Guyanas, the three Guyanas there, they have different languages, Dutch, French, and English. But the main language spoken in Southern America, you could call Latin America, is Spanish. You got maybe 370 million people speak Spanish there. Now, I found on the internet that it's about 212 for Spanish speaker and 206, I think it was, for the Portuguese. I don't know where they got those numbers. Everybody speaks Spanish from Mexico to Argentina and Chile. We understand each other in every one of those countries, no problem. They have some local words sometimes we don't understand, but in general, we can speak with anybody from Mexico to Chile, no problem. Brazil, that's a different story. They speak Portuguese, and anyone who knows Spanish pretty much understands Portuguese if they speak slowly enough. But it's a different language, right, more or less. But one thing they all have in common, and related to Ukraine, is that, none of these countries, red and blue, fear Russia or China. They fear someone else, and it's known as the United States. That's the one that they fear about. Big stick policy, Monroe Doctrine, any of those ring a bell? That's what they're worried about. On the one hand, they can't live without the North, with the United States empire, and they would love to live without it. So they're in this catch 23 situation, can't live without them, can't live with them. And but they have nothing to fear from China or Russia. So when a guy like Lula, president of Brazil, goes out there, he's got this more even version of what's going on in Ukraine, and he doesn't see Russia as being the only aggressor. They say that in some instances, but they reach agreements with Russia as well on economic stuff, and they're not just going to follow, what the United States dictates. They're going to follow their own interests, and the same goes for other countries in the Americas. So when China comes over and offers money, they say, yeah, I'll allow myself to be bribed. Okay, so you got to look at that, the way they're seeing all this. Okay, final note. Here we have something that's going on, comes out of the Telegraph, says the nuclear family is dead. So it's not only population, but the nuclear family, mom, pop, and a couple kids. And it says, and our politicians are to blame. Well, I don't disagree that the nuclear family is dead, but I don't think it's got anything to do with the politicians. And the article essentially says that they're not giving any incentives for people to have children. And I'm not sure that's going to change anything. Okay, it says fertility rates have been halved over the past 7 decades. A third of adults have never been married. Lots of people are not even getting married today. So the old-fashioned tradition of getting married, that's dying. In fact, like I like to say, a lot of people who are getting married today, disproportionate amount of people are homosexuals because they just want to prove that they have the right. Whereas those who have the right say, well, I'm not going to make use of my right, like a lot of people don't make use of their right to vote. They say, I'm not going to vote. And so it's like an irrelevant right that they have to get married or to vote. And in the case of marriage, you know, if you don't get married, you don't have long-term relations. Even if you do get married, you get divorced 3 months later, you know, again, that's not a long-term relation. You don't have kids, that is not a long-term relation. And this speaks volumes of what's going on today. You know, we're not having children, partly because, you know, like I said, we moved to the cities from the country, we become urbanites, and urban people don't have children. That's why I don't think politicians have much to do with that issue. But then on the other hand, you've got this situation where people are not getting married, which is part of the new culture. Service economy, bachelors, or homosexuality, or whatever, non-producing people. Okay, so no marriage, no kids.